Hi, Fatii. Welcome back to the Cosmic Heartist Podcast. The last time I had you on, I don't even know if it was like properly the Cosmic Heartist Podcast yet. So it's so nice to have you here with the podcast finally being its own brand. It's been like up and coming in many different ways. But I'm so excited to have you here to talk about Neptune moving into Aries because the last time I had you on, we were talking about Neptune and Saturn in Pisces. But before that, I would love if you could introduce yourself and share about what are your most favorite things in the world.
Hey, Karina, thank you so much for the invite. I'm so excited for today's episode. And just about the podcast, I think it's so fitting that we're talking about Neptune in Aries today because it's about finding its own identity. And I love that for the Cosmic Heartist podcast. And your question, I think some of my favorite things in the world would be um, to share love with someone that I love, like my loved ones. The amazing amount of things that we can learn about ourselves and others, and kiwis, which is so random. And kiwis, I just love kiwis. My three answers.
I love that a lot. I love that a lot. Tell us about your sun, moon, rising,
So I'm a Virgo sun. My moon is in Libra, and I'm a Taurus rising.
which
And
I love and we
I love,
resonate with very deeply.
I love how we share some of that combination. I love it.
Yes, and we're across the world from each other, and I feel like we got in touch a while ago through Instagram, and just like through doing the same thing, and it's so cool that we've been able to stay in touch, and that it's like
Absolutely.
6 years later, 5 years later, and we're able to have this conversation. And I think it's so cool to be Instagram friends with someone because maybe like even though we've never really seen each other, we have glimpses of each other's lives, and we have communicated and even though we live across the world from each other, we kind of see what the other person does and we get to watch each other bloom. And I think it's really amazing to have people around us that we get to watch bloom and like cheer them on. So I'm always cheering you on whenever I see your posts and whenever I see
Mm.
you showing up on Instagram because I just love the way you share astrology.
I feel absolutely the same way, and I think it's about having this light grid family of people that you can, like you said, you can see into them parts of your own journey, and you love following their journey, even if you're miles away from each other. I just love that, and I feel it as well.
Thank you so much. All right, let's go into Neptune. Moving into Aries, this is huge. The last time we had Neptune in Aries was in 1861, from 1861 to 1875. It's pretty hard to kind of even imagine like the 1800s. What a different time. And humans were probably so different, and ideologies were probably so different, and beliefs were probably so
Oh,
different. But there was also so much that was similar because at the end of the day, we're all humans. We go through the same emotions. We kind of have the same things rev us up and the same things bring us down. And something that we love to do in astrology is study history and study patterns so that we can understand how patterns are going to unfold. However, something that I love to do is intuitive astrology, which is maybe not looking so much at the patterns, but more just feeling into how can it unfold? What can it look like? But I think it's even more powerful when we tie them together. So I think for this podcast, we can maybe start by talking a little bit about the history and what has happened the last time Neptune was in Aries. And then we can go into what we are feeling. But before that, I would love if both of us described both Neptune and Aries so that we just have for anyone that's like completely new to astrology, they're like, you guys are speaking a language I have no idea about. Can you tell me a little bit more so that I can follow along? So let's do a little briefer of what's Neptune, what's Aries, and then what does it mean when we tie them together? You want to go first?
yes. So Neptune is the energy of the c- collective and consciousness. It is the great boundary dissolver. It's the planet that um, is about mysticism, about spirituality, about dreams, about illusions as well. And um, all the things that are blurry, foggy, a little bit intangible in their approach. It's also a planet that is, because it's a transpersonal planet, in our own birth chart, we can only experience it if we create something that has an audience to experience it, just like art needs an audience for it to, to take its full meaning. Just like humans, we need other people to perceive us, to feel like that we are alive. So Neptune deals and rules over all of those things. Now it add waters and everything that is watery, either metaphorically speaking or on the 3D level. So the oceans, the tides. In mythology, it is related to Poseidon, like the god of the seas and the waters, and all that they rule over. So yeah, that for me, that would be my explanation, or my simplistic way of explaining Neptune. And Aries, it's the toddler of the zodiac. It's like the baby. It's the first zodiac sign of the cycle. And it's the energy of going in first, of exploring. It's a fiery sign. It's all about just listening to our gut and going head first into whatever we are here to explore and do. It's a very action oriented, very masculine, very combative even sometimes sign. And when we have these two together, it's like very interesting, but we'll talk about that a little bit more later. What about you, Karina?
I love those descriptions. So I wrote down words just so that I don't lose my train of thought. And so what came for me under Neptune is dreams, prayer, deep heart, spirituality, fantasy, storytelling, media, illusion, games, escapism, nebulous. So like just like entailing a lot, unseen realms, and mystical and psychic. And then for Aries, I have young, fresh, new, exciting, passionate, warrior energy, trailblazing, go getter, fury, creative, daring, risky, adventurous, large, rebellion, freedom, liberation. So, from what you said and from what I said, I'm sure that everyone that's listening is like, wait, these sound like contrasting themes. Like Neptune sounds so different from Aries because Neptune rules Pisces. And Neptune has been at home for a while Neptune has been in Pisces. So we've been Neptune hasn't been uncomfortable. We've been feeling like we've been seeing more people be into astrology. We've been
The
seeing more people,
spirituality, yes.
spirituality. We've seen more people use their psychic senses. We're seeing more people, do witchy stuff and not be afraid of it. We're seeing so much coaching for people to be the
Mm.
best versions of themselves, to come deeper into love, to come deeper into heart. But we've also seen a lot of like psychedelics coming up in the news, psychedelics getting approved. Maybe in some countries, we've been seeing new kinds of psychedelics emerge. And this is all like
Like you
Pisces
said, the
realm, isn't it?
media, like the Neptune and Pisces era, like the past 14 years have been like, it's the age of, like, we have social media all around us. And for me, that's a very Neptunian like a very Piscean Neptunian theme. It's like having this, we just the fact that we met. Like for me, we met during the age of, like, we connected on something that is spirit, like on a spiritual theme, and through what is not actually real. We didn't meet face to face. We met through a very Piscean medium. So I love what you just said about all of that.
Yeah, that's very interesting to think of. And also like how many people now are open to tarot cards or taking advice from cards, or when they're planning their wedding, they're like, "Oh, I should ask you if this is a good date." And it's just so cool to have seen this rise in spirituality, but also, because there's always a but also, there's been so much illusion, there's been so much disillusion, there's been
Yes.
so much like just crap.
Enchantments. Yes.
there, there's been a lot of crap that's been um packaged as if it's something enchanting, and it lures us in so easily. Again, something like social media that was so cool and we met through it can also have that lure that's just like
Yes.
so disenchanting, like so enchanting, but this disenchanting, you know?
And and for me, like Neptune in Pisces, it was also a revelation about people's addictions, like either like you said to psychedelic, not necessarily, but like narcotics and all of those type of drugs, and also to their image on social media, to maybe like spending hours on their screens and just living disconnected from reality, either that's through technology or not, just being disconnected from our own humanity. So I think now that we're ending this cycle, it's really beautiful to see how humanity learned, how each of us individually learned, and how this new identity that Aries is here to present us with is gonna take those lessons, from the last cycle, which Neptune was in, and maybe, hopefully, integrate it and do something beautiful with it.
Yeah. Oh, as you're saying that, I'm just thinking about how, I mean, through this whole Neptune and Pisces, we've also been living through our subconscious or living through our unconscious minds a lot. Like it's very often that I feel like I'm surrounded by zombies, like just people that are I don't know. I don't know where they are. They're disembodied. They're somewhere. They're floating, and that's very Neptune and Pisces. And I'm not saying I'm past it. I have the tendency to also
Mhm.
be floating and to be a zombie and to not really know what I'm doing at all. And I feel like that's the spell. That's the spell of Neptune and Pisces. And just thinking about this cycle ending, but hold on, let's talk about something. And that is how this cycle is almost ending, right? Because
Yes,
we're going to have Neptune coming back into Pisces. So
yes.
let me just go
Mhm.
through the dates before we go any
Yeah.
further. So we have Neptune entering Aries on March 30 or 31, depending on where you are in the world. And then stationing retrograde on July 6 or 7 at 2 degrees of Aries. So Neptune is only going to make it till 2 degrees. Every sign has 30 degrees. So 2 degrees is such a small little piece of Aries, but it's enough to get a taste. And then on October 22 or 23, Neptune moves back into Pisces for a little bit until January. And then in January is when we have Neptune re entering Aries for good, well, for good until 2039. So that is 13 years, if my math is serving me
Yes.
right, of Neptune being in Aries.
Oh,
Oh,
yes.
Fatty, what are you
And
feeling when you think about the energy for the next 15 years?
um, I love how you gave already some of the main key dates, because I think they're gonna play into the energies of the next 15 years. I think we're gonna have teasers. I think for us who love astrology, we kind of intuitively know that astrology is like a cosmic clockwork that gives us, a little bit of cycles and transits, and we have to discern what's about, to unfold on a bigger scale. But for people who are probably just learning about Neptune, Aries, and all of this woo-woo stuff, I think what's good to keep in mind is that um, the transits that Karina just shared are going to be times where we're going to peek into the future, just like sometimes we have a company announcing like the next super robot or computer that's going to be a revolution in a few years. We might not be able to buy it, we might not be able to go get it in the shop, but we know that in a 10, 15 years, it's going to be just super common. And for me, up until summer and um, until October, we're gonna have these themes coming up, like regarding just how there's gonna be a big shift from maybe feeling disconnected to feeling embodied, but not necessarily in the best ways at all times, because we also have Saturn. I noted the date; it's going to be on July 31 or August 1st, depending on where the person is in the world. Saturn is going to be conjunct Neptune, that is going to be retrograding back on its track. And for me, how that feels like is Saturn is the planet of karma, of fate, of restrictions, and it's the planet of boundaries. And it meets Neptune, which is the planet that dissolves boundaries. So I feel like this summer and the next 15 years, like you've asked, are going to be tainted by that idea of what if, like, this immovable object met like an unstoppable force, and what happens when we take something that we view as um the, as sacred or not sacred but untouchable, such as Saturn, and put a spin on it and shift it and dissolve it and turn it into something else. So I think for the collective that might be a little bit intense, but on an individual level, it's going to be super interesting because maybe we're going to take our biggest self-imposed limitations, so the Saturn side of it, and with Neptune in the mix, it's going to be amazing because we're not going to have those things anymore. Or maybe we're going to change something so drastically within ourselves. And all of this is subconscious, like you said. So I'm really excited to see how the next 15 years are going to be really life-changing for people individually, and how also it's going to play out good or bad in the world. But yeah, we're always here to like we always say, Karina, we're always looking at astrology not as something that is dictating a future for us, but something that can guide us through the future and give us maybe um, clues to what to do and what not to do and what to stay away from. And definitely for me, the next 15 years, it's going to be super important to, yeah, to see what needs to be dissolved and what needs to stay grounded and really there, if that makes sense.
Well, first of all, can I just say I love the way you explain astrology and the analogies that you bring in, and just how simple you make it to understand, but you make it simple while keeping the depth. And I just feel so lucky and so honored to have like astrologer friends that are able to explain the astrology in this way, because astrology is astrology, right? But understanding astrology is an art, because everyone understands it differently. Everyone has something different to say about what's going on. So I love having different perspectives on this podcast. Like I usually have Thea, who is my friend from here, and we do monthly overviews. And then I had Jana, who was my first astrology teacher, where we talked about all of the transits happening this year, because we're just talking about Neptune moving into Aries in this podcast episode, but there is so much more happening. And that really plays into how the next 15 years are going to play out as well, right? And the relationships that these planets start having with each other and the way that they start dancing with each other. I think that's what starts making it exciting. Because if we're just talking Neptune moving into Aries, we're talking about these themes that we mentioned. So, okay, fine. We know that as I'm trying to think of it as like, we know that as the rhythm, that like the continuous rhythm. But what happens and the melodies that come in are the aspects that are being made. And that's what's really going to determine um, how we move forward, because those transits are the choice points, right? While Neptune is in Aries, we're just kind of, I don't want to say flowing, because that's what's happening with Neptune in Pisces. So maybe we're
Yes.
dancing when Neptune is in Aries. And then it's like when a transit comes, it's like we're learning a new step. We're learning new choreography. And whenever we learn new choreography, it's always difficult. Like I'm thinking about like learning Zumba choreography. I have to do it like 10 times before I finally get it right. And we get chances again and again. And I see you wanting to say something, so I'll pass
Yeah,
it to
no,
you.
no, please continue. It was just my facial expression as I thought you made me think of like Haka, like the Hawaiian dance. For me, it was like that's exactly how I see the dance of the warrior of Neptune in Aries. Like it just you say
Yes.
speaking about dance, I had this vi vision of us collectively learning how to Haka, but not necessarily being able to do it. But you
Yeah.
know, the goosebumps that you get when you see those type of videos or hear those types
Mm.
of
That
um
one video that was going all around, right?
yes, yes.
And
But
just
I'm
the
sorry.
power. No, no, that's fine. I wanted to hear what you had to say, because you looked like you had a really interesting realization. I love it. And it's true. Like we're all learning. different dances, different choreography, but it's not just choreography that we're learning to for the sake of performing. It's
Yes.
choreography that we're learning for the sake of embodying. Because you said, right, we're going into Aries, so maybe this embodiment will be more embodied. But I think this is just a taste of what will happen once Neptune gets into Taurus. Because Taurus is where we really start talking about embodiment. So I think Aries is where we start getting these sparks of what do we actually want to embody? How can we start embodying without running too fast? Because I think there is so much potential here, and I'm sure you think so as well, with like visionary dreams and visionary ideas coming to fruition and psychic senses coming online even louder, like through inspiration, through intuition. With Aries, I think of like intuition, like fast. It's so fast. It's a spark. It's a spark of like, oh my God, this is my idea. And to have it right with Neptune, it's like, Neptune's giving us the creativity to do it. Neptune is the creative tools, and Aries is the fire of this is what you need to do. But the thing is, it's important to, I don't know what's going to help us. Maybe you can share what you think will help us, but I think it's important to sit with it before going for it. Because with Aries, it's the baby, it's the toddler. Like you said, it has a tendency of moving so fast. It is ruled by Mars. So, it's ruled by
Yes.
Mars. So what do you have to say about that?
I love how you explained it so well because it is true that Neptune as a planet loves to take its time, like, magic, prayers, like you said earlier in the video, in this exchange. Everything that is sacred and holy takes time. And Aries is, yeah, not really a patient type of guy, it is a very um, impulsive type of energy. It is that gut feeling that just, I don't know, if there's an accident, you're going to be the first one to go in to help. You didn't choose and sit and think about it, you just do it. So when it comes to Neptune moving into Aries, it's going to be a great time for people who have been maybe feeling like they've been stuck for the past years, or who need that dose and boost of energy. But for other people it might become unnecessary risks and maybe not thinking things through. So I think one thing to keep in mind for us all collectively and individually as we go through this transit is, especially now that we're going to have the retrograde to think back about, what we're going to put in place for the next 14 or 15 years, it's going to be thinking about what type of hero we want to be, because Aries is the warrior, like you said. It's the hero. It's the, Marvel or DC hero who wants to save the world and save the planet, and sometimes do it in like a very irrational and just impulsive way. But what about anti-heroes? What about not actually fighting negatively or impulsively? What about saying, thinking that a fight is necessary to reach our means? Because the thing about Ares as like the god of war in mythology, is that he is not someone who always fights for justice. That's Athena. That's maybe Libra even. Libra can go to war sometimes. It can be justice. But Aries sometimes has this thing, like as an energy, I mean, it has this tendency to think ego drivenly. So it pushes us to think that we have to fight for everything, and that everything is a fight, and that our spirituality, so Neptune, since we're talking about Neptune in Aries, is a sphere where we have to be on survival mode all the time. And I think, given what's going on in the world already, given the fights and the warfare and all of that, that's, going to continue to brew over the next 15 years, and it might even, become even more entangled because Neptune deception and, Aries, cruelty and all of that. But that's not the topic, because the world is already up in flames. I think it's very important, like you said, to think about what type of hero we want to be, what type of fight we want to fight, and how is that step or lack of steps going to help us and help humanity as a whole. Because it's just so easy to slip into rebellion for the sake of rebellion, or fighting for the sake of fighting during a Neptune in Aries transit, and sometimes even having, a lot of accidents or things happen to us because of our actions. So we need to really be owning and sovereign over our actions, and not just do something stupid for the sake of it. Like fuck around and find out type of energy. We need to kind of think a little bit more about it, I think.
Yeah, this is not the time to fuck around and find out. I wouldn't
Yeah.
say, especially, I mean, I know we're talking about Neptune and Aries, but we just have to briefly bring in Uranus moving into Gemini, and they
Yeah.
form a sextile to each other. And so there will be just lots of words, so many words. So I feel like it's great advice that you gave of thinking about like what kind of hero do you want to be? And I'm thinking about like Spider-Man. How did Spider-Man become a spider? Because he was bit
Mm.
by a spider and then all of a sudden he's Spider-Man. Like these are the examples that we're shown. We're shown something so quick, but it's never really that quick, right? And so how can we reimagine the story? How can we kind of make it more realistic for ourselves? Because now that Neptune is moving into Aries, it's more real. You know, it's more real life. For a while, we haven't been living in real life. We've been living somewhere in the ether, on media, on different types of media, and that is in the ether, and that is, I just can't believe that I never put this together before this. So thank you for bringing that into my awareness. And we've all just been living like somewhere that's not here. And with Aries, it's more like grow up. It's time. Become alive again. And also I wrote temper or face your temper, because we're really meant to either like temper ourselves, or Aries can come with a lot of inflammation, with a lot of heat, with a lot of like bursts. And I always like to say when fire is involved that we need to have a workout routine. I can't say I'm always the best at doing it, especially with my Taurus moon. I definitely like to come in and cocoon every so often. But um, once we start noticing that temper, once we start noticing these spurts, I think working out would help us so much with Neptune and Aries.
Absolutely. And I love how you spoke about inflammation, because that's exactly how I think um, it will feel either on like a 3D bodily level, or on a more subconscious level, if we don't allow our intuitions, our dreams, our visions to manifest in a healthy Aryan way, not like a negative or uh, toxic Aries manner. And I love how you mentioned Uranus moving into Gemini, because for me, when I blend the two, like Neptune in Aries and Uranus being in like a very mercurial technological sign, for me, it's like it has the potential to be like a decade of a lot, even more. We're already in it, but even more disinformation and AI twisting everything, and even things related to like how nations fight with each other. Like how when we see the social media sphere of politicians as an example, we see that right now it's like the war is happening on social media, on Twitter, on whatever. And for me, it's just super interesting to remind everyone that this is now that we need to be super discerning. We already needed to be discerning over the past 13 years. And, of course, we need to be discerning at all times. But now it's going to be more important, because that lie that you just read online can push someone to act out a murder in real life. I'm thinking about the Luigi Mangione story. It's a different, there's a different like analysis astrologically. But for me, it's like those types of events are bound to happen if people are not careful about what they take into themselves. Aries is the head, so like you said, as we move into Taurus, it's going to be more about what we digest fully. But for me, Aries is still related to what we feel and experience. So anything that we read, anything that we see, can inflate and inflame us and put us in states that are not necessarily good. So always stop and think, is this something that I want to do?
So something we were talking about in the podcast that I recorded yesterday with Thea, which is a overview of April, we were talking about how Virgo is such a master manifester, and we have the South Node in Virgo. And so we already are subconsciously manifesting. We're manifesting everything that's living in our subconscious. Like whether we know it or not, it's coming to life. And so I feel like with this Neptune in Aries, it's that much more likely like to inflame and actually become real, but also it's that much more likely to cause inflammation within our heads and give us huge headaches if it's something that we feel like we're not ready for. I know that I told you that we both like to talk about astrology in a way that's not about fear mongering at all, but I really need to bring up the word war because war is a word that comes up with Aries. And we've had it been being thrown around like the world is coming up on its next world war or whatever. And I find that a story, it's all stories, always, obviously, but I find a story that I am resonating with is how it's not about to be a physical war. It's a war on consciousness, which is actually already ongoing. And this came up because of how you were talking about, these comments on social media back and forth. And it's really just all about awareness. And it's like a war that's coming up because it's asking, like, are you operating based on your ego or are you operating based on your heart? Once again, it's like it feels like a mind or heart thing. And what do you have to say about this war on consciousness, or how can we reframe this word war?
I really love how you mentioned this. And for me, it's like it's not even fear mongering, it's being realistic. And I love that about us. It's that we're not astrologers that put rose-colored glasses. And for me, that is actually a very Piscean theme. And a lot more people are gonna go on this journey of actually seeing things for what they are. So I love that about us. But to answer your question, I think for me, the honestly, I think that the thing about this upcoming cycle that we're in is that the enchantments and the deception and the illusions are already in place. We've already gone through a cycle of Neptune in Pisces. Now it's about tapping into emotions. And I love how I think during the first portion of our exchange, we talked about the symbolism of Neptune, and Neptune rules over media, but also movies and everything that is pop culturally. So I think if someone or something were to want to use this time to get a reaction out of people, of masses of people, the best way to do it would be to insert things in what we consider as pop culture. So that's where the discernment comes in. That's where our own judgment and our own boundaries come in. It's telling us everything that we see is pushing an agenda, not because there's like Illuminati and people controlling the world, no, but just because there's sometimes things that people do even subconsciously, like even the people who would insert some imagery of war, of conflicts, of separation between people, they don't necessarily do it in a conscious way. They do it subconsciously because Neptune is in Aries. And for me, Aries and Neptune is like either fighting for our dreams or dreaming of battle and dreaming of fights. And that's like all the movies about like just wars and all the talk about, yeah, the apocalypse is coming coming in the next years, like you said, third world, like the third world, I can never say it, third world war. All of that talk, I think people have a lot of, like, they say they don't want those things, but they put so much energy, and energy, goes where, our intention, like, no, anyways, I forgot the
I
energy
think it's
goes where.
energy flows where our attention goes.
Exactly. I think because of that, a lot of people, they don't think they're creating a world full of division, of hatred, etc. But they are actually, helping and contributing through their actions and through their words into that reality. And Uranus going into Gemini in the summer, Gemini is the spoken word. So I think there's going to be a lot of spells that need to be not taken part of. Like we need to separate ourselves from those things. And I love how Saturn, the planet of separation and fate, is going to come into this entire journey that we're talking about of humanity over the next years. And it's going to happen this summer. And for me, it's a reminder. Saturn is going to conjunct Neptune this summer. So it's going to be at very like a 1 or 2 degree difference. And it's going to be like, yeah, actually, you need to have some limits and boundaries about what you fight for. You say you want to do this and this and that. You say you want community and like-minded people, but what about rules? What about limits? What about boundaries? What about red lines that no one can cross? I think it's very important for us to, not just this summer, of course, but throughout the next phases of life, to not be blind, of course, to the real wars that are happening in the world, because they're happening, and I think there's no escape from that. Um, and to see, of course, this side, I think there's also going to be like a rise in terms of activism as a way of, as a spiritual combat thing. I don't know how to say it, but for me, it's like this. Like in France, they have the figure of Jeanne d'Arc, like Jeanne d'Arc. It's a holy war, like a holy warrior. She's fighting. She literally helped fight, but at the same time, she embodied this mystic, this holy woman who was in devotion to God and to the afterlife. So for me, if we want to be helpful to humanity, we need to bridge some form of activism, but that isn't necessarily just for the sake of activism, for something that we truly care for. And of course, sacred rage is important, but a lot of discernment as well. And yeah, I think, what do you think about it? I'm curious to know.
I love that you brought in Joan of Arc because we did a poetry class on her. Everyone that's listening probably knows Chelsea Diane by now because I mention her almost every episode. And she did a class on Joan of Arc from her hometown, from Joan of Arc's hometown. And that was beautiful to witness. And something that stood out very clearly to me is how Joan was guided by her by angels. It was because she was guided by angels and guided in her dreams that she fought on the front lines as how old was she? She was so
I
young.
think, yeah, I think 15 or 16 or something.
She was
I
so
don't, I'm not
young.
sure, but
I need to go back to that class. I watched it like a year or a year and a half ago, but just learning about the courage in this young woman and the way she was able to do that for a country, for a nation. Any of us can do anything. Like, why are we telling ourselves that we can't do things? I think that's something that Neptune and Aries is going to bring up for us. The realization that we can do whatever we put our minds to. We can create whatever we can dream up. I feel like it's going to be a lot more about um, being more adventurous with what we want to live out because our reality is what we make of it. And when I think about Aries and Neptune, I think about that. It's being the author of our own stories. It's main character energy, I feel like, but in a
yes.
very different way than Jupiter in Aries.
I definitely feel that, and I think that I don't know if you've seen, but like lately we've had all of these trends, like TikTok trends, Instagram trends, like main character era, it girl, I'm that girl. I think all of this is moving into all of these planets, not just Neptune, moving into Aries. And like you beautifully said, I think now is the best time for all of us to step into our authentic self and not be afraid to do what we're going to do, because people are going to judge anyway, because things might not work out anyway, so we might as well learn and yeah, maybe try a new, like, I love a word that you used to describe Aries in the beginning, the trailblazer. For me, it's like really about that. Like there's so many paths we haven't explored individually and collectively, and it's out of fear, of course, out of, sometimes limitations or just ignorance. Sometimes we just don't know that there is a path that can be explored. And now is a great time to, yeah, to go explore, go see what's going on.
I also think Aries brings us a lot of courage to face everything that we couldn't face beforehand. So I think it's pretty cool that Neptune is in Aries because it might look like facing our subconscious fears that we've had and finally maybe going deeper into the triggers that have been brought up while Chiron has been in Aries and being able to figure that and recreate the story. I think there's a lot of recreation going on because it's something so fresh, something so new. It's happening in the first sign of the zodiac. Like, come on, it's going through the last and first and last and first. And this is like the crucial point of the chart. It's where this like energy becomes human, and to have this back and forth into, but what do you really believe in, what's your actual devotion, and then going to, but what do you want to be a hero for, and what do you want to be a warrior for, and then saying something out of ego, and then the retrograde happens, and then it's like, no, no, but what's actually deep within. And I think we're already getting tastes of this with Mercury and Venus right now moving, retrograding back into Pisces. It's like this, let's go forward. But then it's like, no, but is it in the name of heart? Is it in the name of devotion? Is it in the name of like divinity? If it's not, then don't even create it. So I feel like we're going to have this test with Neptune as well. Maybe more illusion. It may not be as clear. Like you said, Neptune is foggy, but maybe sometimes it's good that it's foggy. Maybe sometimes it's good that the lines are being blurred freaking finally. Like lines need to be blurred. There are so many lines on this earth. Like something that's coming to me, and I don't know why, but I should just say it, is how, back in the day when the world was much more feminine, or from what I understand, when the world was much more feminine, there were a lot of circles. It was all about like the eternity and the continuation and a lot of curves. And now that the world has become more patriarchal, there are a lot of squares and rectangles. And so there are just so many lines. And for a while, we've had all of these planets and feminine signs, and now they're moving into masculine signs. But what if them moving into masculine signs is the structure for the feminine to rise? What if that?
Amen. I love that. Like I had goosebumps as you were speaking. Preach. I love it. I really love it. And I feel like the structure that is going to be created when we're going to enter into the Neptune Taurus era is going to be amazing if we do our job collectively to learn those lessons about Aries as the warrior, as the spiritual leader, as the one who is courageous in face of adversity. And I love everything that you said. Like I want a little clip out of this, like this moment. I just love it. And I think if I may add, for me, there's this idea here of um, fighting for what is holy, but also knowing when to either go for the war or like win the battle or win the war. And I think we need to think long term because Aries can be so short term about his gains and his wins. And we need to think about the long haul. What are the battles that I want to maybe not go into because I want to win this war? And I feel like, as you mentioned, this masculine side of Aries, because Aries is indeed a masculine sign, and then we're going to have like signs moving into other planets that are also masculine or a little bit in between, but like Gemini is an example, but still very masculine oriented. I think it's important to lean into that intuitive side and different forms of leadership because leadership can look different for me, for you, for the people listening to this. And there's going to be this stereotypical, I think, in the collective and conscious, this stereotypical warrior and how he should fight for what he believes in. While for me, like the guy fighting literally brawling with someone because he's trying to take his home, that's a courageous man. But also the man who's picking up our trash in the streets is a courageous man because he's doing something that no one else is willing to do. He's very he's not paid enough to do it. He doesn't have any recognition, or people don't, they walk like he's invisible. For me, both of these forms and all in between are forms of courage, and we need to tap into where in our life. So as astrologers, we say we're in our birth chart, but for the people listening, the translation of where where Neptune in Aries is in your birth chart means where does this energy play out in your life? So maybe someone is going to have a lot more courage to express in certain areas, and someone else is going to have to do that work, but in another area of their life. So I encourage everyone listening to maybe take a look at their birth chart, see where Neptune in Aries is happening, what house that is, if there's other planets involved, because that may be an indicator or a taste. Of course, this is very on an individual level, but it's going to be a taste for maybe some of the things or challenges, or even just for journaling purposes. And it can give a lot of clues on what to work on, what to reflect on, and maybe what to stay away from, hopefully.
Let me ask you a question. Let's say someone is listening to this podcast. They say, I want to know where Neptune is in my chart. How do I figure it out? So I would tell you to go to astro.com, put in your time of birth, your place of birth, and yeah, and then you'll get to pull up your chart, and then you'll see different houses. And just for the sake of explaining, I'm gonna give my my seventh house to you. And so Neptune is going to be traveling through my seventh house. So if we were to break down Neptune, and then we already broke down Neptune. So if we were to break down seventh house, how would someone go about doing that? So could you share with me, say, for example, Neptune in seventh house, what would that mean? And how do you go about figuring that out?
All right, I love this exercise. I think first let's begin with the house itself. The seventh house is related to contracts, legal documents, legal agreements, to marriage, to all the things that put us in a very Libra uh, domain. This is me and you. This is you and your partner. This is you and a one-on-one client or relationship or partner. Um, and it is also where we meet others. It is the place of our shadow, so to speak, because it's the things that we do not see in ourselves unless we are put in front of a mirror of someone else or another project or thing. I'm going to orientate it more towards people. But the seventh house is about all of those themes and so many more, of course, but these are the main themes of the seventh house. And Neptune going into the seventh house, it means that already the last cycle was about the sixth house of, you know, our routines, our everyday life, our health, etc. So now these, now that there's a routine in place, for me, this is how I would view the story. Like, Neptune would tell you, like, now that we have a routine in place, now that we know what we need and what we don't need, now that we've dissolved certain things that need to go away in order for our lives and our everyday structure to be complete, how do we relate to others based on what we've learned over the past years? How can we dissolve some of the structures that are no longer working in the seventh house in order to make it better? And also, I think it's how we relate with others, because you have a Libra rising. It's even more interesting how this contrast is going to go, because it's going to be directly opposed the first house, like the ascendant, sorry. So for me, there's this idea of dissolving the boundaries that not the boundaries, dissolving the illusions around who you think you should be in a partnership, who you think you should be around other people, who you think you should be in a one-on-one contract or project, and how you choose to show up in the world. And Aries is about courage. So it's about the courage to work on what is no longer working. Maybe it's in a relationship, maybe it's in a partnership, maybe it's something else. But it's also finding the courage to dig deep and create, like you said, the structure, this beautiful structure, especially when Saturn is going to go over, I think, the seventh house. Yeah, in July, end of July, early August. I think it's going to be a tipping point, like you said, maybe a challenge, a hiccup, but this hiccup is going to be a defining moment for a long structured thing, because whatever Saturn touches, it grants us this long-term energy, and Neptune is here for a while. So I think there's going to be a lot of themes surrounding this. And now on like more Neptunian side, and I will end with this, I think Neptune, whatever house it enters in our birth chart, makes it so psychic and so connected. So I think with your partner, I know that you're married, as if someone else has this placement and isn't married, it's going to be a little different, but you are married as an example. So Neptune in Aries, for someone who has a partner already, a committed partnership, they can share so many psychic thoughts and ideas, and they can feel so connected. And there's going to be this fiery thing that just makes it so obvious that there's intuition, and your partnerships, either marriage or other types of partnerships that you have in your life, are going to be sources of courage in your life and in your own spirituality, and they're going to teach you a lot. So I think it's going to be a beautiful period to see. And if you're courageous and don't go too impulsive, it's going to be fine. That's what I would say.
I love all of that a lot. And for anyone that says I don't believe in astrology, I'm going to tell you my story and what I'm like experiencing currently, because this will make you believe in astrology. So everything Fatii said is everything that I've kind of been working with in the last few months, especially more than any other time, because I grew up at a very like I grew up through parents from a very different time. So my parents have a very or my mom has a very different idea of what marriage is. That generation has a very different idea of what marriage is. And of course, I have a very different idea of what marriage is. Being a woman in the 21st century, it is 2025. We want to be making our own money. We want to be running our own businesses. We want to do everything that a man can do, because who's to say that we can't do the same things? Other than our cycle, which maybe makes it a little more challenging. But it just asks for a little more effort, a little more patience, a little more a different kind of structure. But anyway, so I've been taught of what marriage is or what marriage looks like, and I've been married now 3 years, and this year it's more about really figuring out, what does money look like? What does having our own businesses and having our own jobs look like? What does, because, like, for example, random example, I'll be like, say, for example, I'm at my house with my mom, and my husband Navs is here at home. If I tell her Navs is home, she'll be like, "Oh, go home, go look after him. You should be at home." I would feel so uncomfortable if my husband was home and I wasn't. Whereas I'm like, "Mom, I'm spending time with you. Like, there's nothing wrong about me spending time with my
I think
mom." I'm
I
sure.
think we have the same mom. My sister is married, and Moroccan moms are similar in that
To
pattern, I
Indian
think.
moms, right? It's like a similar part of the world. I feel like the cultures are also very similar. But yeah, so it's like things like that, and really understanding, what does marriage look like now? Because I'm not gonna lie, divorce is a very real thing in today's day and age, and we're seeing more and more of it. And I think to not go through that, it's important to define marriage differently. It's important to understand, what do you think marriage is, and what does your partner think marriage is? Or if we're talking about relationships, what do you think about the relationship, and what does your partner think about the relationship? And it's important to find that middle ground. I feel like a lot of times when we were growing up, we would hear the word compromise when we talk about marriage, but I don't think it's as much about compromise anymore, but it is about listening, and it is about understanding, and it is about finding a middle ground rather than compromising. I don't think anyone has to give up anything. Maybe change a little bit, but I don't think it's about giving up and then having to, grieve or mourn a part of yourself that you've given up. Because ideally, in a partnership, we're both bringing our full selves, we're both bringing like huge individual beings, right? So, that, and then Navs and I are moving into my childhood home. In should be between June to July, fittingly, right?
Very fitting. I was
Very
gonna say,
fitting.
wow.
Very fitting. And so it's coming back to me. It's like coming back to this inner child within me, because Aries is also this inner child, and realizing like how I've grown from then, but also what are the parts of my inner child that feel so true, and how can I start building more relationships around her, and also building this relationship that I have with my husband in a way that's, or like not building because it's built, but growing it into something that's more adventurous, something more playful, something more courageous. And this is pretty much everything that you said. And it's probably what we're going to be working through for the next however long we have Neptune and Aries till
You
2039. But
got it.
I also love that I had you explain this because for anyone listening, if you want a reading with Fatii, that's kind of how it goes. This is just like a small glimpse. She just talked about one house, but I love how spot on it was, and I love how easy you make it to understand. So I'll ask you later on at the end of this podcast how people can reach out and how they can book with you. But actually, this is so cool. I think I want to do this more with astrologers because then, like, the listener gets an idea of, what is it really like?
Practically, yes, what
Yeah,
does it
maybe
mean?
they don't want to do a reading because they're scared and they don't know what's going to come up. But this shows you that it's not scary. You're kind of just being like, these are the themes that I see coming up. And then I'm like, wait, those are the themes coming up. And then we're like, oh, that's so accurate. But actually, it's just that we're reading the patterns and we're giving language to something that maybe you haven't seen before or haven't heard before. And you can also decode this for yourself. But like
Mhm.
I was saying earlier, you would decode, like I would decode it for myself in a different way than you would decode it for me, because every astrologer feel like uses astrology as an art. It's a poetic art form, and the words that we choose really change up the story that we're telling.
And I love how every time someone, like the first times I used to like have my birth chart read, I was like, I know this, but I didn't have the right words to put it
Exactly.
into, like sometimes you have those ideas and you know what's happening in your life because it is your life, your birth chart, your energy. But sometimes you just don't know how to explain it. Like sometimes some patterns or energies or behaviors or ways of thinking, I'm like, this is what it is. Now I can have like a very short sentence to say, yeah, this is how I am. But yeah, I love how practical astrology can be, and at the same time very philosophical, very grand, and just like archetypal, like we were doing just before that. And there's no need to choose. Like Neptune in Pisces era taught us that we our spirituality, our um all the things that we care about, like astrology, don't have to fit into one mold. We don't have to be spiritual just because we want to talk about the cosmos and because we want to, fly into new Earth. And we don't have to be spiritual just because we want to know at what time should we send that email. We can do both. It can be practical, help us on a daily practical level, just like it can help us expand our mind, our hearts, and our spirits as well. One last thing
Yeah.
about the transit that we looked at entering the seventh house, because we talked about defining just the last thing, because I just thought of it right now.
Yeah.
Um, Neptune is the mystic that is not very, that doesn't like, he doesn't take his pen and paper and starts writing, okay, I'm gonna create this, this, and that. And Aries is the guy who forgot his pen and paper because he's already, doing his thing. So I think when it comes to defining what things to fight for, either in like if it's the seventh house scenario that we gave, like defining what marriage looks like to you, to your partner, or to anyone else watching, like in another area of your life, don't think that if you're not clear or if you don't have a clear answer that there's something wrong or that you have, lost the fight or the battle, because that's not how Neptune in Aries works. Neptune in Aries feels things intuitively, and maybe at some point you're just going to be doing an activity. Like if we take this example of your own personal life, you're going to be doing an activity and you're going to feel with your partner, this is it, this is who we are. Or it's going to be a dream or just a thought or a sentence. It doesn't have to be something so set in stone. And I think a lot of people in astrology sometimes, like the type of messages that I sometimes get are like, yeah, but I don't know how to, and I'm like, it's okay. Like we all don't know what we're doing and we're all just doing our best. And most of these planets reflect parts of our psyche that are growing and continuously trying to find a definition for themselves. So you don't have to put any pressure on defining something or knowing something, because we'll just feel it like over the next years. We'll just know. And everything that we say today, maybe we'll do a video in like 5 years and build on that and, expand on that and maybe have a different twist and different outlook. So yeah, I think just for anyone watching and even for you in your life, I think Neptune in Aries is not about precision. Like Neptune in Aries is definitely not about precision. It's about feeling into it and going for it. That's it.
Yes. Yes, about feeling into it and going for it. Because the last note that I wanted to add before we go just a bit into the history, is how Mars is going to be moving into Leo in April. And that just adds on to this Neptune and Aries energy. And I think in a very beautiful way. It allows us to understand what we are a warrior for, but in a way that's authentic, in a way that's true. It could look like entitlement and pride if we're going the other way, but it also could look like very heartful, like very conscious creator. And it could really, I think, define what creativity is to us and how we are meant to have fun in this lifetime, because I think each one of us are meant to have fun. Each one of us is creative. And I'm so over like my own brain and everyone's brain saying that creativity is just like drawing or painting or like making something beautiful, because creativity is life. Creativity is living. And I think that's just going to get louder and louder with Neptune in Aries and with Mars being in Leo again. Finally, I think it's this ability to see what really makes us happy, what really brings us joy. Like, yes, there is that spark, but what's the thing that sustains us after the spark? Because a spark only lasts for so long. You know, Aries is cardinal. It appears and then it burns out too. But with Leo, we have this ability to realize what's fixed, what lasts, what's more felt.
I love this explanation that you gave, especially about the fixed and cardinal side of the zodiac sign. I love it. It's the energy this energy, I love it for us as an individual on an individual level. I do not appreciate it as much on the collective level, and I think you agree. I think, like you said, it can go into ego-driven purposes really quickly, but I absolutely second everything that you said, because individually, this is a great time to know, like you said, this long haul flame. Like, what is the flame that is going to sustain my drive, my energy, my desire and willingness to go for things from the heart, that is going to be authentic to me and for the long term. So I really, really love that for us.
Yeah, me too. And I want to bring in the line like, as within, so without, right? As above, so below, as within, so without. Because when we're so occupied figuring out this own story for ourselves, our own authentic selves, what we want to do, what we're warriors for, what's true to us, we don't care what's going on in the media. We don't care what's going on outside. Instead, we're having people reflect to us exactly what we're living, right? Again, we create our reality. And so if we're so into this, not okay, if we're so into our own story, but not in a way that's egoistic, right? In a way that's more, I'm really interested to know who I am and to have this purpose and to create a life that I really love. And I want to share this with people. When we're living in a way like that, the universe shows us reflections and examples of that. We are in a world of mirrors. It's always true. It will forever be true. And so, yeah, I think, yeah, we definitely don't love it on a collective scale. And I don't think we need to go deeper into that because we kind of already talked about the themes about why. But there's just a reminder here, like dig deeper in. Like whenever you start getting distracted by everything going on the outside, dig deeper in because there is a story here that like wants to be told. We are all artists. That's why this podcast is called Cosmic Heartist, and we're all creating our days. Um, every day, whether it's consciously or unconsciously. So, how can we do it more consciously? Because if we do it consciously, we're going to get the benefits of this Neptune and Aries. But again, we're humans, so we'll always have our hiccups and our mishaps. But Fatii, wanna talk a little bit about the history of what happened the last time Neptune was in Aries?
So I think most astrologers think about the Civil War, the American Civil War, when they think about historically what happened 165 years ago. Um, and we might talk about that a little bit, but I also want to add that for Karina and I, who are both from nations outside of the US, as much as the US's politics are very important because they impact all the entire order of the planet the way it is defined now. But there's also a lot that happened in other areas of the world, and it is so fascinating how all of these events that sparked that just popped up out of nowhere, but it's not really out of nowhere, but just popped up during that time. We're all moving into the same energy. It's the same feeling. And I love Karina, because you have such a poetic way of explaining things. At the beginning, you mentioned at some point that we're all humans. And although it might have been very different for us and someone from the 1800s, there's still something very similar. And for me, this is where we see it. Like when we do these researches as astrologers or just as astrology enthusiasts or people who are into history, we see that these people had fears and uh, rebellious streaks and, fed up emotions and, desire for change, just like we do right now. We feel today like the world is is becoming more and more chaotic, that things are not working out, politically. Of course, we're going to go into details. I just want to give a little context, but we feel as things are turning into shit, so to speak. But people back in the days felt that same way too, and they did things about it. And sometimes it was for the best of their country. Sometimes it didn't work. It was a struggle. It was a fight, but it's still, although it didn't have a direct effect on the country's state or the people's state, it sparked a feeling, like you said, in the heart that continued and lived on, because ideas do not die, like the axiom says, and they live on and continue until they manifest as something beautiful. So I would start, and I will let you continue from that, Karina, if you'd like, with the American Civil War, because it is like a defining moment in US history. And it's also like it's not the exact same period, but the now that we have like a Pluto in Aquarius transit, we can also speak about how we have a lot of similarities between these two energies of Pluto change and Neptune dissolving boundaries. And for the US, it was a time of conflict, a time of division, and a time where the people were just like, we're done. Like we cannot have this situation continue. And this is a very Aries theme, so to speak. For me, it's the masses. Like when I say the masses, I also think of oceans, because like oceans of people, like the collective unconscious of people, the subconscious of people waking up and thinking, okay, no, this is not who we want what we want our country to be. We want to take back the lead. And yeah, it can be sometimes very gruesome. It's not pretty. Like history is not pretty. Like when I think of the l'ère des Lumières, like the French Revolution as an example, people think of a very beautiful time of when people, became, they didn't want monarchy anymore, but it was about, cutting heads, which is a very Aryan theme as well. But this type of conflict can be something that we can see the last time that Neptune was in Aries. Not to say that it's the same, we're going to have the same repetition, but we have the same brewing effect of the collective not being happy with something that is going on right now, and this fighting for what we do not like, like with arms. And I don't know how to say it, but I'll take you. I think you can give a different spin to what I just said without it being too yeah, too focused on the fighting part.
Well, there definitely is a lot of fighting, whether it's conscious, subconscious. There's a lot of fighting with ourselves. There is a lot of fighting within our own bodies, with ourselves, with our minds and our hearts. And honestly, I think it's so important for, I guess, we already have Neptune moving into Aries, but this time that we have Neptune into Aries and then Neptune back into Pisces and then Neptune back into Aries, I think this is a great time to take inventory of the wars that we have going on in our lives, the wars that we are having within ourselves, the wars that we are perpetuating in relationships, the wars that like any kind of wars. I think it's a great time to take inventory because awareness is half the battle. And once we stop creating war within our own bodies, again, coming back to the world being a mirror, we start having that mirror out in the world. And I know that we think that we're just one small human. And I think this is Neptune. We're a small human and we're looking at the planet and there are so many stars and we're just so small. But I feel Neptune moving into Aries says, sure, you're just a small human, but you're still a human. And what you do reverberates, it plays out. People experience it. The people around you, your community feels it. They show up the same way that you're showing up. And so, if we are giving into, and this is me lecturing myself too, but if we are giving into these little wars within our own bodies, within our own minds and hearts, then how do we expect to live in a world where there is no war? How do we expect to live in a world that is completely full of love and there's never going to be a world that's completely full of love, right? Because we're on planet Earth. It's a dual planet. There's just no way. And it's, I think, the biggest cosmic joke of life that we're all just craving oneness and we're all just craving unity, but all we get is duality. And the only way we understand unity is by being on the other end of duality. It's such a trip. This life is such a trip. However, what I want to say in response to what you said is that it feels like um, Neptune in Aries has this energy of reawakening the rebellion within us. Because it's like, even though we didn't live through that whole Neptune cycle from like Neptune in Aries all the way to Neptune in Pisces, obviously the last time was in 1861 and we were not alive as this human then. Maybe we were alive as a different human and maybe we have it living within us. But while we had Neptune in Pisces, it was like we became comfortable. We became comfortable with the way things were. We became complacent about how the things were. We said, okay, we'll pray about it or we'll dream about it. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. It's amazing to pray about it. It's amazing to dream about it. It's amazing to live in fantasy. But with Neptune moving into Aries, that spark again, right? So the anger starts brewing. That's not to say that by the end of Neptune being in Aries, we're going to get a democracy. That's not to say that this is going to spark complete world change. I mean, that is to say that this is going to spark world change, but this is not to say that it's going to complete world change. It's not really that fast, right? So, what I wrote is it's like eventually leading to a democracy, but not immediately because we're starting to feel the uncomfortableness within us. We're starting to feel the rage. We're starting to feel like, what the heck is going on? You know, that temper is starting to brew, inflammation, like we said earlier, it's starting to be there. And once we feel uncomfortable, that's when change happens. So it's this beginning, I think. And like you said, we don't know with words, but we feel it. And we feel it so deeply that we have to do something. And so I think this will be a good idea of like, what are the things that we do to feel worthy of being on planet Earth? You know, that sounds very deep,
Mm,
but
just
that's
to
like,
live. But
yeah.
yeah. I love how you mentioned that it is very naive to think that going through this transit is going to solve all the problems because we're just going to realize everything and have this, beautiful la la land of democracy. But it's not to say, like, at the same, I love this vision because it says, hey, we're doing this for a purpose. There's meaning in what we're doing, in the work that we're doing. It's not going to change everything, but it is going to change enough because like just some of the notes that I wrote for events that happened the last time Neptune was in Aries outside of the American Civil War. There's the unification in Italy, who also had a desire for more sovereignty for over their countries, etc. We had the Meiji Restoration in Japan, who also shifted from being a very classical feudalistic country to a more modernized, or at least they were at the start of what we know Japan to be like today. We also had a lot of artistic movements, just like Impressionists, as an example, here in Europe and France. We had the emergence of spiritualism, like people in the UK, and especially in like the new colonies, the new British colonies, and who had this mystical interest in what we know today as Ouija boards and, you know, seances and tarot. And like these are just examples. And we also mentioned one about the Philippines, but I think I'll let you talk more about that in a minute. But I think all of these events, and these are just examples, they show that these countries are not perfect today. They're not living in like heaven or something. But if those events have not happened, if Neptune was not in Aries at that time, if people, like you said, did not have that spark of rebellion and desire for change, maybe their country now would not be where it is today. Maybe events like, you know, the butterfly effect, I think that the world would be so different today. And we need to feel joy, not fear, to be part of change. Maybe no one is going to remember us in 100 years, but maybe through our actions, we're going to change something that is going to ripple out. For me, it's like Neptune is like the ripples, like when you throw a stone in water and it just grows bigger and bigger. And we need to be part of that movement. And like you said, not block it, because oneness is what we want. So we need to be the ripple and the ripple of positive change. Um, I note it's so funny we had a synchronicity, Karina and I, because we both looked at an event that happened in the Philippines, like early resistance and nationalism that awoke during that time. I don't have more information because me and history and the history of Philippines, I need more research. But I would love for you to talk a little bit about it and what that represents, like symbolically, archetypal, like just to give a little bit more context to the people listening.
Sure. So I'm not the best at history either. I will say that before I go deeper in, but I know enough maybe to talk a little bit about it. So the Philippines has a hero named Jose Rizal. If you're from the Philippines, you know Jose Rizal. There's no way you don't know him. In high school, I had to read books written by him for first year high school, second year high school, uh, maybe all 4 years of high school. We had to read texts by Jose Rizal. So he was a hero around when the Philippines was colonized by the Spanish people or by Spain. And so he was basically, through stories and through creativity, he was writing novels about what the Spaniards were doing and how they were like taking away the rights and taking away the power of the Filipinos. And eventually he was executed for it. But his life, throughout his life, he was a Philippine hero, bringing, Philippine heritage back through different ways of like, this is so Neptune, right? Storytelling and creative arts and, just being able to, and it's sneaky in a sneaky way. That's also Neptune. It wasn't straight up, and it was also like, I can't remember so much about the books, but one was called like Ibang Adarna, like about a beautiful bird, and then the other one was like deeper about like the revolution and deeper things going on. But then hold on, I also want to say, always fact check Chat GPT, because I was asking Chat GPT, where was Neptune when he died? And first it said Neptune was he died right before Neptune moved into Aries again. And I was like, are you kidding me? You just said that he was born when Neptune moved into Aries. Then ChatGPT is like, all right, my bad,
Oh.
I made a mistake. And I never knew that that happens, but of course that happens. It's a computer, but always fact check ChatGPT. But the reason I said what I said when you asked about democracy like coming but not being there yet is because I was basing it on Jose Rizal's life. And he was born the year that Neptune moved into Aries. So fascinating. So he was born in 1861, and then he died in 1896. And by that time, Neptune had moved into Gemini. So I find this very interesting that Neptune was in Aries when the uproar began and when it was all about, coming back to culture, coming back to the heritage. And I have more to say about Philippine heritage in a second. But um, he was born at that time, and then when
It's
he
almost as a reincarnation. I don't have like a literal understanding of karma. I don't know
yeah,
if we've already exchanged about this, but for me, it's like almost he was born to live through that archetype. He was given that archetype for a reason.
exactly, exactly. And now in the Philippines, he's known as a martyr who gave up his life for the country because he was executed. For being so devoted to his country and for like wanting the country to get independence. Of course, he was born when Neptune just moved into Aries. And when he passed, Neptune was in Gemini, and it was not till Neptune was in Gemini also, if I'm not mistaken. I may be butchering this, but it was not until Neptune was in Gemini also that the Philippines finally gained independence from Spain. But after they gained their independence from Spain, it's important that I say that they were bought by the US. So there is a lot more that goes into Philippine history than what I cover here. But for now, let's stick to the main point. And so it started with Neptune and Aries, but you see how Neptune and Aries gave the feeling, but Neptune and Gemini gave the language. So fascinating. It's so fascinating. And I also want to talk about how colonialism, man, like the Philippines, before the Spaniards colonized the Philippines was so closely related to nature and to art and to beauty and to music and to, all the felt things that we know that we're like earthlings. And then the Philippines got colonized, and it's like that remembrance got forgotten. And it's all about speaking in English and, being able to connect with the rest of the world. But I feel like more recently, especially with Saturn and Pisces, there has been a coming back to the land, a coming back to the traditions, a coming back to the beauty that used to exist. And like you said, this is just going back to how you said, if this hadn't happened, there would be so many things in so many countries in the world that would have not progressed. And countries wouldn't have found their own identities. Not to say that every country is free right now. Not to say that every country has found its identity. And we are aware of that. And we
Amen.
are not living in an idealistic world where it's all magic. But we do have to look at stories that give us hope as humans, because otherwise, like,
What else do we have?
exactly.
I love the story about you have to type down for me the name of the after our talk about the nationalist hero in the Philippines. But his story I think is so beautiful and just things coming full circle. And I love how astrology always has that. There's always a story and something coming back full circle. And it's so beautiful that you also mentioned that colonialism is was for me, colonialism, because like I'm from Morocco and we had like Spanish, Portuguese, and French colonization. And during the last time Neptune was in Aries, we had Spain and France like brewing more and more pressure over the country. I didn't have like specific events, but I know that it was during this time that they got their hold over the country just before a lot of other stuff happened. But what I mean to say is that for me, colonialism and imperialism is like this it's a virus of control and separation, especially out of oneness. And it's so sad because so many countries are still living through that paradigm and not, for me, maybe not listening to their inner. Um, for me, countries are like humans in a way because they also have in astrology their own birth chart, etc. They have their own egregore or energy, collective energy, and some countries are still not tapped into their subconscious, so maybe they're Neptune. So the only way that that manifests sometimes is through violent acts, like Neptune in Aries. So kings losing their heads, people being shot, civil wars. And it's so unfortunate because if countries as nations, of course, we are the ones who make our nations a nation. If people focused on their own subconscious mind and collective and consciousness, they would probably help the country express certain transits in less violent ways. So I think it is also like an act of kindness, and even like, I don't know, spiritual activism, to look to be the best version of ourselves, because we're not only helping ourselves, but we're also helping our entire community, because we are able to uh, not act out, irrationally. Because let's face it, for most of these events that we found, like if I take just the Civil War, that I know a little bit more than the other historical facts, the people who acted in the Civil War, most of them were a little bit illiterate. Some of them were not very aware of the politics and the hidden, decisions, etc. So it is safe to say that the people with the least amount of information are going to be the people who are most likely to act in very cliche and stereotypical ways that astrology brings. Let's say Neptune is in Leo, they're going to be the most self-centered, because they don't know what Leo energy is, because they don't have, the ability to go and be expressive. Neptune is in Aries, they're going to be very, selfish and just, battling with each other instead of thinking about courage and other things. So yeah, I think for us all listening and, living our lives, we need to sometimes think that everything that we do, even if it's very small, can have impacts beyond our understanding. So just being united with our own selves, and like you said beautifully earlier, Karina, not fighting wars inside of our being, is such a relief. Like it's everything that we need to be striving for, because we're not going to be changing the world, but maybe we can change ourselves.
So we've been talking a while about Neptune in Aries. I feel like we've given everybody, including ourselves, like a good idea of what to expect while we have Neptune in Aries. I would love to have you on again to talk about maybe Pluto in Aquarius, and also maybe when Neptune moves back into Aries in January. That would be cool after we've gotten a little glimpse of what it looks like. But before we round up, do you feel like there is anything else that's important for us to share with Neptune and Aries, and how to really um, make the most of this transit or this dip into fire?
I think one last note that I had written for myself is how in mythology, Ares, the god of war, and Poseidon were always at war. But since they're both immortal, both of them never died. So for me, archetypes symbolically, like how that plays out, is that Neptune and Aries are not necessarily the most complementary and easiest energies to work with. Um, but they're both forces that we cannot stop. Our courage, our eagerness to do things, our drive, and our dreaminess, our spirituality, our ability to tap in and, connect with higher realms. Those are things that we are never going to suppress in ourselves. And if we try, we're going to fail. But if we try to put them at odds instead of, make peace between those two sides of ourselves, what's going to happen is that it is the commoners who are like the commoners, like the other sides of our psyche, of our birth chart, that are going to suffer. And I say this because in mythology, whenever Ares and Poseidon fighted, like I heard, like I read a story about the son of the god of war discovered that wait, sorry. So Poseidon's son um, had like intimate relations with the daughter of Mars. And Mars did not like that very much. So he had a fight, and there's a rock that is still in Greece with like this phenomenal fight that happened because of that event. And the son and daughter died, and the entire people of that region suffered. There, of course, there's a lot of different versions, but for me, what spiked my interest is that at the end, everyone dies, but not the two people who hate each other the most. So for me, if you are having difficulties reconciling between your desire to go ahead and, charge at life, and your desire to be spiritual, more intuitive, etc., it is okay, and you don't have to make a war out of it, because if you do, it is your creativity that's gonna not flourish. It is your self-confidence that might be impacted by what the tug of war that you're playing within. So yeah, that would be the last little bit of information. I don't know if I made it clear enough, but for me, it's like, don't allow doubts or inner conflict stop you from birthing beautiful things into the world and becoming a beautiful thing in the world, because that's ultimately the biggest gift.
Yes, 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 to all of it. And just to piggyback on that, I feel like just to like give ourselves space. Like like you said, it's okay to have both ideas. It's okay to have more than one. Like for so long, it's been so much about it's this and only this. And maybe because I know that Aries is also authoritative and it may still be that way, but because we're freshly moving out of this Pisces energy, a reminder to ourselves to hold as much spaciousness as we can for ourselves so that we can adventure, so that we can play, so that we can test what feels good, but also to be accountable and to have accountability buddies and to keep ourselves so in check that once we stray away from what's actually true to us, we know, like our compass knows. And if we don't know, we have those mirrors, we have those relationships surrounding us to be like, hey, why did you say that? That's unlike you. And then we get to sit with ourselves and be like, oh yeah, you're right. And this could go two ways, right? It could be like, how dare you point that out about me? Or it could go, hey, thank you for that. Now I'm going to sit and have a conversation with myself and see what's going on. And I think when we have spaciousness, when we aren't rushing to do 100 things, it's that much easier to slow down, be like, oh, yeah, you're onto something. But when we are trying to do 100 different things, then it's like, I don't care for what you're saying. Like, leave me alone. And that just leads to more and more and more, you know? And yeah, I think that's
I'm
Neptune
gonna
and
circle
Aries.
back to just one sentence that you said earlier, the moment that gave me goosebumps. For me, I think yes, Aries can be ego driven, but some of us need to think about ourselves right now. It's after having no boundaries during the Neptune in Pisces era. I think some of us need to focus on what makes us feel alive, because that's where the magic is. So I really love everything that you mentioned, and I'm feeling inspired. I love it. I love it.
Me too. This conversation is amazing. And I think if I could wrap up Neptune and Aries in one sentence, it would be live fully alive. All right, Fatii, tell me, what do you think makes you a artist?
Mm, What makes me a artist is my curiosity towards the world, and probably just the fact that I'm amazed to be alive every day. I'm not perfect in a way, so there are days where we forget that, where I wake up and I have to go to work and I have to do this and a billion things. And like you said, not having enough space to calm down. But what I love and what makes me a artist is that I always come back to center. And I hope to continue to always have that, little voice within me that reminds me, like, hey, like, listen, focus, chill, relax. Who are you? What are you here to do? And yeah, I think that would be my answer. But I think your answer, I'm gonna put like a journaling page on it or something, because it's very deep. Like, I love it.
Let me know what comes out of that journal, but I
Yes.
love it. And I see you as a artist wholeheartedly with the way that you show up, with the words that you use, with the way that you inspire. I'm always inspired by the way, I already said this, but I'm always inspired by the way you show up and share
The
astrology.
same.
And I'm just so grateful. And lastly, let people know, where can they find you? How can they work with you? How can they get their own reading? And yeah, what does that entail?
Yes, so if people are interested and connected to my way of looking at astrology, I have services of birth chart readings. I also do other tarot and astrology combined, sessions where we look deeper into the birth chart, but also with the tools of intuition, of tarot, of oracle cards. So yeah, those are some of the services that I provide. I have a website called Living Simplyy, simply with two Y's, .com, where I have like all the links provided and where you can book, where people can book. I currently do not take more than 3 to 5 birth charts per month because of time issues, like we talked earlier, Karina and I. So if you are interested, go book your birth chart before it's too late.
Yay.
That's all.
Okay, since you said oracle cards and tarot cards, I have this oracle deck sitting right in front of me. So let's pull a couple
Wow.
cards. It's the Starseed Oracle. Haven't pulled from this in forever, so I
I
think it'd be a
love
great
this.
idea for us to just riff off on
Play
what we're
around.
receiving. Yeah. Ooh. Oh my God, I missed this deck. This was the deck that I would use like when I just started waking up and just seeing these images. It's like, oh my God, I remember.
Yeah. I'm
Okay.
curious about the imagery. It looks beautiful.
So I'll show you. So this is our first card. It says Earthed, learning how to be human in the world, but not of it.
I love it. Is that a spark? No, it
It
looks like a
it
spark.
it looks like it. It's like a diamond that's this is to me, this is Neptune and Aries,
Yeah.
after Neptune and Pisces. Like this is the Neptune and Pisces, like
And
coming
it,
down from the heavens and
yeah.
slowly coming into Earth. Yet knowing that if we don't relate with every human on the planet, it's okay because, I'm trying to go away from this idea of not go away, but I'm trying to limit my use of the words like star seed and light worker because it has this feeling of
Yes.
like disassociating from this earth. I love to use like earthling because we are like
Mm.
earthlings, but I also find this interesting of like being in it but not of it, like accepting that it's okay if we're not like everyone else and we're just different. Maybe we are star seeds, but I also like to think of it in a way that's more grounded.
I absolutely understand. And I think that's why we vibe, Karina, because for me, like it, I do think that it is a judgment from my end. So maybe I am wrong for doing it. But whenever someone uses words like I am a starseed from planet Nibiru, I'm like, you just put a wall between you and everybody else. While I think that we are all starseeds from whatever planet you decide you're connected with. And for me, it's sometimes a delusion for people to go into like this explains why this and that, and I'm not gonna focus on other earthlings because and yeah, I sometimes have a difficult time with those words as well for these reasons. But hey, maybe like I understand you, but at the same time I think that maybe some of the people who do use them um don't see it as like me versus them. So
Exactly.
I
If it
hope
works, it
that
works.
yeah, I hope that it works for them and for everyone.
Exactly. Exactly. This is not to judge. It's just to say
Yes.
that for us, it doesn't sit right. Like I used to love the word light worker and I used to be like, I want to be
Yeah.
a light worker for
Might work.
light
Yeah.
workers. And there's nothing wrong with it. But to me, like I'm sure your Taurus rising feels me, but my Taurus moon, it just wants to be off the earth because I know that we are. And it's such
Yeah.
a luxurious, pleasurable earth if we allow it to be. Um,
So much.
so that's Earthed. Our second card is Star Keeper. It says Cosmic Ancestor, see the light by staying grounded. Hello. Literally what we
I
just
love
said.
it. I love it. And
So
they're
this
both
is the
fire cards. I love it. It's like the triangle
yeah.
going up. Love that.
And so I
So
love how
beautiful.
here it's dropping in, and here it's like creating this
Yeah,
like bubble around yourself to know who you are, but also still having the channel. So there's this very like up and
I
down
love it.
channel. And then the next card, I got four. So the next card is called You Got the Love, and it says
You got the
Hatterian
love.
energy,
Remind me.
codependency, and boundaries. I hear that song too in my head every time I
Mm.
hear You Got the Love.
Uh,
um, so
this
this one
reminds me
is
of Libra, like
yeah.
the opposite of like the opposition between the axis of Aries and Libra, of how maybe this Neptunian in Aries cycle is going to teach us how to bring the best out of our Libra-ness in the world. How do
Yeah.
you feel about it?
And also just looking at all her different faces, it's bringing me back to not creating war within
Yeah.
ourselves and instead like coming back to love within ourselves, because when we have it for ourselves, we realize it that much more with everyone else. This also brings to my mind Neptune and Pisces and how the
Yes.
boundaries dissolved and how it's time to get the boundaries back in place.
I don't know
And
if you've
just
watched Sense8.
no,
You should. Is it
sensate.
Sense8? It's like a TV show with
I
people
haven't seen it.
connected with each. You're gonna love it. And for me, it's like this card to a T. Like if there was like a
Mm.
poster of the, you're gonna love it. It's like very short a TV show of people being connected. That's the plot. Like people
I'm
connected.
gonna check it out. I'm gonna check it out and then I'll tell you what I feel about it.
Yes.
The last card is baby steps. It says action, follow your intuition before it makes sense. I love this card a lot. It's always been one of my favorite of the deck, but of course it makes sense. And I love
So
how, look here,
Aries.
how she's walking into a portal. Like she's climbed all the
Wow.
steps and you see like she's left a part of her here because she's going up higher
I
and
love
higher
it.
and she could fall down a cliff, but instead she chose to follow the vision. And the
I
vision is
love
a
it.
portal, and the portal is, who the heck knows what we
Mm,
create of our own portals, but it's like take that little step at a time and
I
see where it
love
takes
it.
you. So Fatty, if you were to tell us something considering all of these cards, what would you
For me,
say?
it's a journey, and it's beautiful that you pick them in that order. For me, the first card is that spark, that initial spark that we're now entering with Neptune in Aries. The second one is building on who we want to be, our courage, defining our, things for ourselves and the beautiful life that we want to envision. The third step is fighting our inner wars and maybe going even in solitude to resolve and make peace within ourselves. And the fourth card, like the things you described, so beautiful. We have to leave things behind and to take risks, but it's not going to be without, taking small steps. Every step will count, and I love it. I'm so curious about, the future that she's entering into, but I'm so happy for her, for us, for everyone who is going on this journey.
Yeah, I love it. You see her here in the bottom starting out her journey, and then you see her here, and then you see
Yeah.
her here. And I love how you just tied that whole story together because that just summarizes our entire podcast episode. So if nobody listened to what we said throughout that whole thing and only listened to the last 5 minutes,
It
they would
is.
have gotten it.
Yes. Thank
Thank
you
you,
so much.
Fatih.
This was
It has,
amazing.
yeah, it has been an honor having you. As always, I appreciate you, and I cannot wait to have you on for another podcast episode.
With my, like, the pleasure will be mine. I love it. Thank you so much.